Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and this is the Technique of the Month from Digital Photo Magazine. Now this month we're looking at filters and I'm going to show you how to create this interesting filter effect using Photoshop elements. Okay, let's close that down and go back to our starting picture. This is where it all begins. Now, filters. Let's be honest. I've used filters, you've used filters, everybody loves filters. The trouble with filters is once you use them, you tend to find they often look a little bit poor. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, but an individual filter on its own isn't the best way to work. In fact, if you really want to get the best out of filters, you need to use multiple filters in combination. And if you can find a combination of filters that looks really good and write it down, you can create a filter recipe. Use that recipe on other images and you can get very similar results. So that's what we're going to create, a filter recipe. Right, now we need to use the layers for this, so let's come up to Window and down to Layers if you can't already see them. Now on the layers you'll find at the moment you have a single background layer, which is exactly what you expect when you bring an image into Elements. But for filters to work really well, it's good practice to use a copy layer to apply your filter to, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to come up to Layer, duplicate the layer, and click OK. Now that will give us a copy, and it's a copy in exactly every single detail. But we're going to apply our filter to that copy, so our original is always untouched. But before we do, there's something else you really need to know about filters. Now, filter effects will vary according to the size of the image. If you have a bigger image, you may get one look. If you have a small image, the look from the same filter at the same settings can be very different. And that's true for the filter we're going to use. I know from experience that I need to make my picture smaller to get the effect I want. So let's come up to Image, Transform, and Free Transform. Now I want to make this image about half the size it is now, and I could just grab a corner handle and away we go, but to be more accurate I'm going to come to the options bar along the top here and set a width and a height of 50%, and then click the tick. Okay, so we now have a mini image in the center of our picture. That's good, but another thing about filters is when you apply them, they often spill out beyond the edge of the original picture. Now normally that's not a problem because the edge of the original picture is off the screen, but because we've shrunk this down, that could be an issue. So we're going to put a little selection just to hold the whole filter effect together. Quickest way to do that is to hold the Control key on the keyboard and click on the layer thumbnail, which is this one there, like so, and we'll get a little selection going around our mini image. Okay, so up to Filter, then down to Pixelate, and across and down to Mosaic. Now the Mosaic filter pretty much does what it says. It'll make a sort of, well, a mosaic effect really. I can't think of another way of describing it. It varies in size between pretty small, which is 2 pixels square, through to reasonably big, which is 200 pixels square. Now I want very big, but reasonably big is as big as this filter will go, so reasonably big it is, 200 square, and click OK. So how do I get from reasonably big to very big? Well, simply a matter of going back to Image, Transform, and Free Transform. Now again, I could stretch out the corner handles, but we'll be accurate. We'll put a width and a height setting of 200% in, click the tick, and we've stretched it back out so it fills the screen. Okay, select and deselect. We don't need that edge selection anymore. So we now have our mosaic effect. The trouble is, we can't see the picture underneath anymore, but not a problem. Have a look at the layers. Here it says normal, which means this layer is opaque. If we change the blend mode to overlay, you'll get a mixture of the mosaic layer and the original picture below. Right, one more filter effect to go, and one more copy of a layer to go. So we'll go back to Layer, duplicate the layer once again, and this time we should have a copy of our mosaic effect. We're going to go back to Filter. We're going to come down to Stylize and choose Find Edges. Now, Find Edges is a great little filter. There's no options, it is just Find Edges. And what it does is to go around looking for any edges of the pictures and then put these little dark lines on it. And you can see the effect working just there. And it just helps to highlight these individual squares and adds to the effect. Okay, so that's pretty much our filter effect finished. But looking at the picture now, well, there are a few things you can change. For example, the original picture, if I turn these layers off, the original picture was that kind of muted color tone. our resulting picture has a much brighter, more contrasty look. But if I change the blend mode away from overlay to soft light on our find edges layer, you'll see the effect comes back much closer to our original picture. So you've got a few things you can change. I actually like it on overlay, so I'm going to leave it there. If we come back down to the mosaic layer, make that active, if your picture went a little bit too bright or a little bit too dark, you could try multiply or screen, and that'll make the end result brighter or darker. But again, I'm going to stick to overlay. So there are a few things you can do to change the overall effect, but I kind of like it like that. One thing I am going to do though is just work on the corners a little bit, either lightening or darkening those corners down. I'm going to change layers once more to the bottom layer, the background layer, and I'm going to get a paintbrush, and I want to lighten my corners, so I'm going to paint with white. Obviously, if you wanted to darken them, paint with black. I'm going to drop the opacity of that paintbrush down to about 20% and just paint a few little spots in the corners like that. And as I dab it in, you'll see what happens, and I just get a nice little effect going on in the corners there. And maybe we'll put a little kind of dab around the edges as well, just to add to that slightly interesting filtered effect. Okay, so there we are. There's how you can take a fairly ordinary picture, apply a nice simple filter recipe, and get a really interesting result.